They showed it this week, the moment so many of us knew was coming, yet none of us were ready for. In The Chosen Season 6, we watched Jesus scourged, beaten with whips, torn down in body, but unshaken in spirit. It was painful, almost unbearable, to witness, not because of the acting alone, but because deep inside we know this really happened. This was not just a scene. It was history. It was sacrifice. And for many watching, it stirred something raw, something sacred, something unforgettable. When the episode begins to move toward the scourging, you can already feel the air getting heavier. The silence, the uneasy looks, the way the crowd shifts, it all builds toward what you know is about to happen. Then it does. The Roman soldiers bring him forward, and for a moment, time almost stops. We aren't just watching another show. We're watching someone give everything he has, not for himself, but for everyone else. What makes this so powerful is not only the physical pain, but the way it's shown. The camera doesn't need to exaggerate. It doesn't have to fill the screen with blood and shock. Instead, it focuses on his face, his eyes, and the reactions of those watching. That's where the heartbreak lies. His followers can't bear it, and honestly, neither can we. We see their tears, their brokenness, and in that reflection, we feel our own. The actors don't just play their roles, they live them. The fear, the sorrow, the disbelief in their eyes makes it impossible to forget that this is more than entertainment. This is storytelling that reaches into your soul. Every strike of the whip is not just pain on his back, it's pain carried in the hearts of everyone who loves him. It's pain we carry too, even as we sit safely on our couches. But here's the thing. This moment is not there to shock us. It's not made to make us turn away. It's there to remind us of what he endured and why. And that's what makes this episode so much harder to watch than any action scene, any battle, or any moment of loss. Because this isn't just one man suffering. It's the Son of God choosing to suffer. By the time the scourging begins, many viewers are already in tears. And it's not just sadness, it's awe. Awe that someone so innocent could accept so much pain. Awe that love could look like this, bloody, broken, yet still shining with purpose. This is why the scene matters. This is why it stays with us long after the credits roll. The moment the scourging begins, something changes inside the viewer. It isn't just the sound of the whips cutting through the air or the cries of pain that make it so heavy. It's the silence inside us as we watch. That kind of silence where your chest feels tight, where your breath slows, and you almost want to look away but you can't. The Chosen doesn't just show violence, it shows heartbreak in its purest form. What strikes most deeply is not the brutality itself, but the reaction of the people standing there. Mary's tears, John's helplessness, the disciples' trembling hands, all of these small details make it feel personal. It's no longer just about Jesus being beaten. It's about the people who loved him forced to watch, powerless to do anything. And in that, we find ourselves. Because when you see their sorrow, it mirrors our own. This is where the storytelling becomes more than a retelling of Scripture. It's where it becomes alive. The pain shown is not distant or ancient. It feels close. You don't just see it. You carry it with you. Every lash feels like it strikes your own heart, and yet the show never loses its reverence. It doesn't sensationalize the suffering. It slows down, lingers, and forces us to face the weight of sacrifice. Some fans described watching this scene as almost unbearable. Tears flowed not just from sadness, but from the realization of love so deep it chose pain. Parents watching with children felt the urge to cover their eyes, yet also felt the need to explain. This is what he endured for us. Others said they had to pause the episode, step away, and return later. It wasn't easy, and maybe it wasn't supposed to be. And this is the paradox. It hurts to watch, yet we need to. Because without seeing the suffering, we cannot fully grasp the cost of love. Without the pain, the message loses its power. The Chosen reminds us that this story is not meant to be comfortable. It is meant to change us, to confront us, to move us to tears and reflection. When the camera lingers on Jesus, broken yet unyielding, something happens inside the viewer. It isn't pity, it's reverence. It's the understanding that this isn't a hero in a story taking blows for dramatic effect. This is the heart of our faith being played out, reminding us that every cut, every drop of blood was endured with purpose. That is why the emotions hit harder than any scene before. What lingers after the scourging is not just the pain we watched, but the question that echoes. Why would he allow this? In any other story, a hero would fight back, break free, or call for justice. But here, the true power is shown through surrender. Jesus does not resist, does not argue, does not raise his hand against his oppressors. And in that silence, the message becomes louder than words could ever be. This scene in The Chosen doesn't only remind us of suffering, it forces us to see love in its rawest form. The scourging was not an accident in history, it was a choice. He endured it willingly. Each lash, each bruise, each wound was not simply an act of cruelty from men, but an act of mercy from God. Because through his weakness, the world would find strength. Through his pain, the world would find healing. The biblical roots of this moment are clear. Isaiah's prophecy, "By his stripes we are healed," comes alive in front of our eyes. It's no longer just a verse written on a page. It's flesh and blood. It's agony and endurance. You begin to understand why the prophets spoke of this moment centuries before it happened. It was always meant to be. Not as a tragedy, but as a victory disguised in suffering. And here is where reflection takes us deeper. The Roman whips tore into his body, but what they could not touch was his mission. They could wound his skin, but they could not wound his love. They could strip him of dignity, but they could not strip him of purpose. Watching this unfold, you realize that the real battle was not against soldiers or rulers. The real battle was against sin, despair, and death itself. And this scourging was the opening strike of that battle. As the audience, we are left with more than emotions. We are left with a mirror. We see in his pain the weight of our own failures, our own guilt, our own need for redemption. The scene doesn't let us escape. It doesn't allow us to say, "That was then, this is now." Instead, it pulls us in and whispers, "This was for you." Every moment of it was for you, and that's what makes this reflection so piercing. The Chosen doesn't just ask us to remember what happened, it asks us to carry it with us, to let it shape how we see love, sacrifice, and forgiveness. Because the scourging of Jesus is not the end, it's the doorway to the greatest act of love the world has ever known. As the scourging ends, the silence it leaves behind feels heavier than the noise that came before. And yet, within that silence, something else begins to stir, a sense of hope. Because what we just witnessed was not the defeat of Jesus. It was the proof of his unstoppable love. The soldiers may have thought they were breaking him down, but in truth they were only showing the depth of his strength. Love strong enough to embrace pain, to carry shame, to endure rejection without turning away. This is why The Chosen's storytelling matters. It doesn't stop at suffering. It shows us that every lash carried meaning. It was not meaningless pain. It was not cruelty without purpose. It was the foundation of redemption being laid, stroke by stroke. And as much as it hurts to watch, it also calls us to remember, we are not just spectators to this story. We are part of it. That is the challenge left with every viewer. What do we do with this moment? Do we watch, weep, and then move on as if nothing happened? Or do we carry it with us, letting it change the way we live, the way we forgive, the way we love? Because this scene, as unbearable as it is not only about what he suffered, it's about why he suffered. And that why points directly at us. But here's the beauty. The story does not end at the scourging. The darkness is not the final word. The hopelessness is not the closing chapter. Just as the pain reaches its breaking point, so does the promise of something greater. Resurrection waits beyond the wounds. Joy waits beyond the sorrow. Salvation waits beyond the suffering. That is the hope we cling to, even as tears run down our faces. So if you watched this week's episode and felt broken, if you had to pause, if you cried until your chest ached, know that you are not alone. This is the reaction of every heart that understands love when it sees it. Share what you felt, speak about it, don't hold it inside. Because when we share the weight of this story, it becomes lighter. When we remind each other of the hope that follows, it becomes brighter. And as the screen fades to black, let this truth stay with you. The scourging was never the end. It was only the beginning of salvation's greatest chapter. His pain carried purpose. His wounds carried healing. His suffering carried love. Love for you. Love for me. Love for all. That's the power of this story. That's the reason it still breaks us, and yet, somehow, still makes us whole. When the episode ends, the images don't fade from your mind. You carry them almost like shadows into your own life. And maybe that's the point. Because the story of the scourging was never meant to stay locked in history or held on a screen. It was meant to live inside us, shaping how we walk through our own struggles. Think about it. If he could endure such pain for the sake of love, how can we not find courage to forgive, to show kindness, to stand strong in our own battles? His wounds remind us that love is not soft or easy. It is costly, it requires sacrifice, it often hurts. But it is the only thing that truly changes the world. That's what The Chosen captures so beautifully. It doesn't just tell us what happened, it asks us, what will you do with this? For some, this scene may be a call to faith. For others, it may be a challenge to look deeper at how we live each day. Do we carry grudges when we should carry grace? Do we seek comfort when we should step into courage? Watching Jesus scourged makes these questions impossible to ignore. And here's where the weight of the story becomes a gift. Because while the pain is heavy, the hope that follows is even heavier. It reminds us that love is stronger than violence, that forgiveness is stronger than cruelty, that life is stronger than death. Every scar becomes a testimony, every wound a signpost pointing us toward redemption. So maybe the real question after watching this week's episode is not, how do we move on, but how do we carry it forward? Because carrying it forward means letting the memory of his suffering fuel the way we love others. It means seeing his sacrifice not as distant history but as a living call to compassion today. This is what makes the scourging scene more than just a hard-to-watch moment in a TV series. It is a mirror, a message, and a mission. A mirror that shows us the cost of our brokenness. A message that tells us love is stronger than pain. And a mission that calls us to live differently because of what he endured. The scene may leave you shaken, but it should also leave you awake. Awake to the depth of his love, awake to the cost of our salvation, and awake to the truth that this story is still unfolding in us even now. When the episode is over and the credits roll, the world outside your window looks the same, but you don't feel the same. The light in the room is still there. The sound fades. But something inside you refuses to go back to normal. That is the mark of a story that isn't just entertainment, it's transformation. The scourging of Jesus, as portrayed in The Chosen, stays with you because it is more than a moment on screen. It's a doorway into reflection. Suddenly, you notice how quickly we turn away from suffering in our own lives. How often we look for easy answers, for comfort, while forgetting that love itself was birthed through pain. The scene whispers to us, don't run from hardship. See what can come through it. For some, the silence after watching is filled with tears. For others, it's a heavy stillness, like the weight of history pressing down. But for all, it is an invitation to stop scrolling, to stop rushing, to sit still long enough to let the truth sink in. This was not fiction. This was not just acting. This was real sacrifice, real blood, real love. And when you realize that, the episode becomes more than memory. It becomes a compass. It begins to guide how you look at your own life. You see the pain in others differently. You begin to value love differently. You understand that real strength doesn't come from avoiding wounds, but from enduring them for the sake of others. That's why turning off the screen doesn't mean the story is over. It means it is now in your hands. What you felt in those Painful minutes is meant to ripple into how you treat the people you meet tomorrow. It is meant to remind you that forgiveness is stronger than bitterness, patience is stronger than anger, and compassion is stronger than cruelty. So the question lingers long after the episode ends. What will you do with what you've seen? Will you leave it behind as another dramatic moment in a series? Or will you carry it with you, letting it remind you that the same love that endured the scourging still calls out to us today? Because the truth is, the story doesn't end when the screen fades. The story continues, in us, through us, and because of Him. And that is where the true power lies. This is where everything leads. The silence after the scourging, the tears, the questions, the weight we cannot shake. And yet, within all that sorrow, there is a pulse of hope that refuses to die. Because His suffering was not the final word. The whip did not have the last say. The cross was not the end of the story. That's why this moment in The Chosen is so hard to watch but so necessary. It tears at our hearts, but it also plants a seed of truth. A seed that reminds us, love is never easy, never cheap, and never weak. Real love bleeds. Real love breaks. Real love gives everything away so that someone else can live. And that's what makes this episode unforgettable. It's not the brutality, it's the beauty hidden inside it. Beauty that says, you were worth it. Beauty that declares this pain had purpose. Beauty that whispers, this is not the end. When you turn off the episode, you might still feel broken, but you are also reminded of something greater. The story that began with suffering ends with victory. The scourging points us to the cross, and the cross points us to the empty tomb. And that empty tomb is the reason we can sit with the pain and still breathe hope. So as the screen goes black, let one truth remain bright in your heart. What He endured was not just history. It was for you, it was for me, it was for everyone. And because of that, no matter how heavy the suffering feels, it will always lead to light. This is why we watch, why we remember, and why we carry it with us. The pain breaks us, but the love remakes us. And in that love, we find the strength to keep going, the courage to keep believing, and the hope to never let go.